you. Thank you to all the panelists, certainly for the transparency and just giving us so much detail behind the scenes, which I think is a real luxury to hear, certainly, and we should take advantage of that. So I really hope to see a lot of people coming up to the microphones and queuing up for questions. I have one, David, if you don't mind. In your MBA, no, I'm just kidding. You brought us through 3 scans that you obviously had a very methodical approach to. Within that environmental scan, which I saw was very holistic, you're looking at NGOs, what's happening in academia. Was that all done internally, or do you get help with that? Does a society of your size source that, or?
Yes. Is this on? Okay. So for this journal, we did all of that internally just through our network of connections, volunteers, et cetera. For a few other journals that we're developing business cases for, we did use a consultant, and that consultant was very helpful in helping us connect with non-members, individuals outside of oncology.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Come on up.
Morning, I'm Tony Derniak from the IEEE. Thank the panel for a very interesting session. I'd like to offer an alternative view of things. Instead of thinking about print or electronic, I think the distinction is between editorially packaged versus dynamic information. So if you think about a newspaper, a magazine, a journal issue, it's editorially packaged. Somebody decides what goes on the cover. Somebody decides what gets treated as a long feature article. Somebody decides, an editor decides this should just be a short news story. And with today's tablet devices, you can get, and you think about things like The Economist magazine, Wall Street Journal, they have very, very effective editorially packaged products that are still distributed electronically through the tablet device, but it's prepackaged, and there's an edition that comes out, an issue that comes out every day, versus a dynamic website where things are being posted an article at a time. And the way people access it is dynamic because for example, you get articles based on what's the most frequently read article, what's the most frequently emailed article. So it's very dynamic. And in terms of some of the other trends that you were talking about, when you have a global audience, for example, we at IEEE have found we have over half of our members outside the U.S. And one of the things we found is that when you think about the traditional printed magazine, the membership magazine, IEEE Spectrum, one of our biggest dilemmas was getting it there fast enough to everybody around the world. And we were trying to, one of our biggest customer service issues was my issue didn't arrive yet. It was 3-4 weeks later before they would get an issue in some parts of the world. With a tablet device, everybody gets the issue the same day. So the distinction, so when you're serving a global audience, having the electronically delivered packaged product can also be useful. So I just offer that as an alternative way of thinking about things.
Nice. And when I think of the word packaging, I go back to branding, and you had brought that up as one of your comments from the folks that you polled. You know, you're losing branding. I wondered if any of the panelists or anyone have seen creative approaches to what's lost when it's just an online presence, perceived lost in branding versus, with the print.
I actually wanted to comment on what Tony just said. There he is. I think you bring up a really great point, and a lot of times it isn't a versus thing. And it shouldn't be a versus thing. The question I think that some societies face is that they want to retire print because it's very cost prohibitive and they don't have the revenue. They don't have revenue tied with it. It's a little bit easier. They can think about different ways and different behaviors to try to help people through. And then others, though, that they just have really strong revenue streams associated with it. So I completely agree with you. I don't think the question is one thing versus the other. The question is, what does an organization do that has a large dependency on print? And I think you offer some great opportunities that could be real behavior changes. And the other thing I wanted to pick up on that you said, which is really important, is that as organizations become more international, that is helping with much more of a reliance on electronic means because you just can't get print fast enough or cost effectively enough. So I think that's kind of tipping the scale. Open access is totally tipping the scale because they are born digitally, they stay digital, and they never have those print legacy issues to think about. But the issue is that there are still a lot of organizations that have a high reliance on print, and how do you put print into the proper perspective to reduce that reliance, just to have a healthier revenue portfolio, so to diversify your revenue portfolio, and also to meet member needs.
And from a revenue point of view, one of the key issues is advertising. And we found that the
I would just echo what Ann said, and for us, it's not an either or, it's all of the above. So some of the things that you've mentioned, we absolutely need to do. We're sort of maybe unique in oncology in that this is the golden age of research and development for oncology drugs, and as a result, we're kind of still in the golden age for display advertising in our print publications. And until that goes away or is severely threatened, we still retain print. And from a branding perspective, we've done reader surveys, and we are still surprised at how many physicians still read print and how many authors and publications committee members have said, well, if you do away with the print, is anyone going to submit to the journal? Because there's still this physical value that authors appreciate, especially older authors, of having their research published in print. But what really drives our decisions is the business model for the journal. So Journal of Global Oncology, we determined it didn't make sense to have a print version of this journal. One, because our vision was to have this an open access journal, but also because we just didn't see the advertising revenue and potential for this publication.
Hi, Peter Ashman, BMJ, and this is a related subject really that I wanted just to share what we've done at the BMJ. The BMJ is a bit of a hybrid between a magazine and a scholarly journal, and it goes every week to 150,000 members of the British Medical Association. And what we found was that this journal was just not serving the needs of those members who really wanted to read the news, analysis, and education, whereas our online users wanted to really access the research. So about 4 years ago, we separated the two, and thebmj.com is the publication of record now, and the weekly print is a much smaller, 40 pages down from about 80 or 90 a week, curated version of the journal, which goes to the members every week. And so it's much more targeted by the editorial team to give the readers and the members of the association, the print publication, really what they want. Readership has gone up enormously as a result of that change we made a few years ago, but we still get asked quite frequently, can I recycle my BMJ without taking it out of the plastic wrapper?
Peter, I have a question for you too. When you say it's curated, one thing that we've seen happen is a lot of publications that do have a high news and commentary component as well as research will go to printing news and commentary and then abstracts. Do you do something like that, or do you actually pick selected articles?
A bit of both, actually. So everything goes online. The research articles are one-page summaries, which we ask the authors to write, and we give them a template to structure it. It's not just the abstract; it's actually a specially written summary of the article.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you said that, because we've actually been spying on the BMJ.
Just talk to him. You don't know.
Yeah, I know. And we also are lifting a page from a journal that Elsevier publishes. So in the future, one of our journals is going to adopt this print short online long model. And there are two reasons for that. One is to increase readership, because our market was telling us that they just don't have time to read full-length research articles. But also tied to that is how readership is tied to advertising. And we think that by doing this, it will position the journal better for the commercial markets.
Just a quick comeback on that. The BMJ relies very heavily on both display advertising and job advertising, as well as subscriptions. But one of the things that we found is that there's a guilt factor with a print publication that actually readership was suffering, because people were almost scared to go there because they knew they wouldn't be able to get through it. And I think that's The Guardian had the same issue actually in the UK with their publication. And so I think a shorter, curated, targeted publication actually increases print readership, while everything else is there and discoverable online.
Yeah, and just one last comment on that. That tactic is enabling us to actually expand the editorial pages for this particular publication. We'll be able to publish more, and we'll actually be able to expand into another topic area for this journal by reducing the number of print pages.
Just to bring us back a little bit around to membership, we heard this morning about so much about the needs of a society membership, how they might be changing changing, or in some cases being very similar to what the society set out for whenever it was established. Are we finding that members are submitting and submissions are coming from members? I mean, David, you just spoke to, if we take away the journal physically, will they remember to submit? So what do we know about members supporting the journal in the best way possible, and that's by writing?
Yeah, I would say that for ASCO, the majority of ASCO members do not submit or publish in our journals because many of them are full-time practicing clinicians, they're community oncologists, so it's actually only a very small percentage of members that submit to a journal, our journals and other journals.
What do you find with IDSO?
So I think we have a different type of membership, and so we have, roughly 50% of our members would say that patient care is the primary thing that they do, but I think that they're working in they're more likely to be in sort of an academic medical setting where they're also doing clinical research and they're publishing. So I think we have probably a higher percentage of our members who are submitting and publishing with our journals.
I would say that in some areas, engineering and in chemistry, pharmaceutical sciences, members do publish in their journals. It's something that, again, because of the demographic, if you like, they're mainly researchers and they value the society journal, so they will submit their papers too.
And do you feel, based on your presentation, that members understand the value that the publication is bringing to them for some of the services that you certainly outlined, but in general?
I think they do. I mean, it takes some time to build the traction and the awareness through the society that these services are available. But increasingly, the journal is seen as the platform of value because it's from which most of these activities spring. So you will have a journal, and through that, open access now is enabling a different sort of engagement between the society and the author. It's a new revenue stream. Continuing education is also providing opportunities through which societies can further engage their members and also attract new members, but also develop new revenue streams.
Yeah, I like very much that part of your talk where you were. We've tried to do that on a much smaller scale, just at our annual meeting, where we'll have sessions on sort of what distinguishes a publishable manuscript, or how to submit manuscripts that are really sort of like some of the sessions that are at the beginning of the meeting that are targeted towards fellows in training. And where feasible, we'll have our editors-in-chief or associate editors come in and give presentations. So I think it's a really great thing that also sort of reinforces the value of the membership in the society, too, because it's really nurturing your career.
Just make one final point on the international members that we spoke with who do publish expressed a frustration on behalf of colleagues as well as themselves about the challenge of submitting research to the top-tier journals in our field. And, the research is high quality, the science is sound. It just doesn't fit within the scope of many top-tier journals because the research is more locally or regionally relevant. And that's a big reason, it's a big driver why we launched Journal of Global Oncology, to be a home for that research that is high quality, but typically gets rejected by the top tier publications.
I'm hoping for a couple other questions. I'll go all day. I like these people. One question for the panel. We outlined 4 possible agenda items. What would be one that you'd love to see come up and percolate to the top? I was inspired, again, by Simone's the continuing education aspect, whether it's CME or C in the physical sciences, and that has a natural tie into the publications as a revenue and as a service to members. So that's what I wasn't thinking that before, but now I'm seeing that. So Diana, what are you thinking?
So I have a definite bias here, but I think that just to echo one of the audience members earlier who talked about the role of marketing and public relations, and that's part of my background as more on the PR side as opposed to the marketing, but we've done a lot of work trying to work collaboratively with our editorial offices and our PR firm to promote the research that's published in our journals. And we just did our first press release for OFID, and the usage for the manuscript for the article that had a press release was like through the roof compared to the usage for the other articles. Not surprising, but we've also received really positive feedback from authors who've had press releases around their research, and they really appreciate it. And then just from the society's perspective, reporters love those kinds of stories because it's breaking news. So when we go back to reporters, those same reporters, with other stories that are maybe a little bit wonkier, that are related to our policy agenda, they're more receptive because we're giving them good content that they need.
So give me 1 second. So we'll come back to that.
Well, my question is more operational. Diane Scott Lecter from American College of Physicians. This is directed to Simone, and it's really about cascading. Does Wiley spend any time educating its editors and its associate editors about the types of journals that they're cascading to, and what those editors find acceptable? At least what I know from journals when I've done cascading, that made a huge difference when we did that, and it also alleviated the frustration of having an article cascaded to a journal which was then rejected. And when we took that time to educate the editors, even though the new editors from where things go to will see it through their eyes, we found a much higher acceptance rate in the end of those articles that were cascaded. And I believe you also, follow-up question, you also cascade from your Wiley-owned journals and from your society journals at times to your Wiley-owned journals. Am I right about that?
Yes, that's right.
And there's a revenue stream associated sometimes with that connection.
Sometimes there is.
Okay.
I'd need to find out a bit.
I just wanted to make that known to the audience there. Thank you very much.
No, but in response to your question about spending time educating authors, we have been informed and we've learned from the process as we've gone along to make sure that the process becomes more effective. So we have sometimes what we call a managed transfer, where we will write to the editor and say, this is the paper and this is why it's being recommended for your journal, just so that people get a better quality. Everyone gets a better service out of the process rather than just trying to cascade blind. Does that answer your question?
I was more concerned about the editors than the authors.
The editors too, again, and the transferable peer review process that we recently rolled out tried to address that in more detail by trying to move the review card, the scorecard, through the process so that the editors receiving the new paper were more familiar with what was rejected and why. And they could then make their own decisions. They were free to then send out for further peer review if they wanted. Yeah.
If I could just make one comment based on your question, Maureen. One opportunity, I think, and need that societies can fulfill, and again, I'm speaking from a health science or medical society perspective, and that is, publishers, I think, focus a lot on helping authors get published, the whole ins and outs of getting your paper accepted, preparing your paper, but we don't necessarily help researchers do good research, and maybe moving back a bit in the research cycle is something that publishers could help with, and societies. And so ASCO, we go around the world and we try to educate clinicians on what is good clinical research, and then augmenting that would be a workshop on now how do you get that research published.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. We think about after the process has started, so thanks for the reminder. Mhm. Let's go in the back first, because you were there.
Okay, well, thank you to the panelists. I think this is always fun when I come to these meetings. I'm Brandon Nordine from the American Chemical Society. And when I come to these meetings, it's a great reminder about even though we talk about ourselves as STM, there's different points of view between large and small publishers. I'm sure if we were at a broader publishing meeting between the humanities and the STM, and that kind of, I think, where you are shapes your perspective a little bit. Certainly at ACS, which obviously is very large, or fairly large for a society publisher, we've gone through several of these transitions that were just talked about today. And I think one of the phrases that David uses today was social capital. I thought it was very interesting because I do think there's an inevitable tension between the business function of the publications group, which to a certain extent we almost tropically move to by instinct, and essentially the social mission of the publishing unit within the society and with the society membership. And I think that's an interesting balance to try and explore, because I think ultimately that may set parameters as well as, I guess, open new doors to how you proceed as you kind of try and untangle this within your specific group. I know at ACS, which is as a large organization with a lot of governance structures, typically change comes very slowly. Back in 2008, 2009, when the Great Recession was hitting with almost immediate force, both in terms of diminishing print advertising, accelerated cancellation of print subscriptions, especially with duplicate print and digital subscriptions. And it became very obvious we had to take some immediate and drastic action. We canceled our membership print benefit, which of course was deeply discounted, mid-year. Now, we only had less than 10% of our members actually using this membership. It wasn't bundled with membership, but it was a peppercorn price, like $89, I think, for a journal. So overall, we had somewhere between 70 to 100,000 subscriptions being held by a relatively small number of our subscribers. We have a vociferous membership group that will complain about the change of a color of an invitation to a conference. We had less than 25 complaints. So, maybe it was the times, maybe it was the time that everyone recognized the issue of financial duress and the communication that went along with that. But, we had also at that point had a very, very robust digital solution that had been broadly accepted, certainly throughout academia. So access to that content was less of an issue. So I think you really have to sort of take a look and say, well, what's the mission of the publication, whatever the format you're doing. So, for example, we also have a membership magazine. And there is certainly within the membership group, not so much within membership itself, but the membership staff view that membership magazine as an absolute key value proposition in their annual renewals. I think the challenge is when you take a look and say, well, what's the cost of supporting that publication versus the cost of membership? And are you willing to bear that, or are you willing to bear increasing the prices to cover that? I think, again, those lead to some pretty serious discussions. And I think, going back to an earlier session when people talked about the role of professional marketers within publishing in general and certainly within society publishing, I think it's posing those difficult questions and forcing those difficult discussions is really paramount to, I think, business survival as we go forward.
Good. Nice to hear from ACS with all those examples. Last one before lunch, please?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Sure. My name is Paul Johnson. I'm here with a company called PubRep. and just want to thank the panel. But my question is, I'm also a physician and an author, and I submitted a paper to a journal, and in my field, vascular surgery, print is still very much dominant. So I love print because I think, or I believe, that it's still seen, it still has good impact. And several peer review cycles later, I just got notification that it was accepted, but it was accepted in a new online-only publication. And so it's still sitting in my inbox, so I don't really know what to do. Because, I don't know what the impact of that journal is going to be. So my question is that what can societies do to help alleviate fears of journal authors that these new models are actually going to be useful and seen and have impact? So, thank you.
So having an impact factor, I think, ultimately long-term is going to demonstrate that. Again, I think we have tried to promote the new journal to our members as often and frequently as we can through email and through other solicitations to make them aware of the presence of this journal. I think it's something that we're just going to have to work on in the long term. But so far, based on the submissions that we're getting, I think we're on the right track. So, it's an excellent question because, we've wrestled with this at our publications committee as well. So,
I would say, and I'm not an author, but if I were in your shoes in this day and age, I would maybe assess the level of author centricity for different journals and your prospective publishers. And I did not coin that term. Everyone's heard it. Author centricity means, alternative metrics. How are they telling the author how many times it's been downloaded, how many social media mentions there have been for that article, but also how is the journal or your publisher promoting your research, not the journal, but your specific article. And that's something that we've done at ASCO, is to shift our marketing away from promoting the journal per se and trying to get subscriptions, and to promoting the research, the individual article, to drive usage online, which has all kinds of wonderful benefits. So to assure you that your research will get the maximum exposure and promotion, I think you just have to assess the attributes of the journal and the publisher and what they're doing at the article level.
I actually have a question for you. Did you know that was a possibility when you submitted, and did you agree to that?
Well, when I initially submitted the paper 9 months ago, that option didn't exist. But then in that time frame, this new journal had come up, and you can't resubmit you can't put the resubmission in without checking the box to say I agree to whatever.
Oh, you couldn't opt out.
You can't really opt out. So you agree with it. So sort of.
I think actually that scenario is a good case for everyone in the room to think about too. Just what how you're getting into something, knowing what you're getting into, agreeing to it, or having the option not to agree to it up front, I think would also kind of give you a different perception of interacting with that organization overall.
Yeah. We would have grandfathered you.
Okay, well, let's give this panel a great round of applause.
Talking for myself.
And so I think, Joe, did you want to give us some instruction? Is there one more question? Oh, it's Bernie. I got to get Bernie.
Bernie Rouse, ACM. I just wanted to comment on this last question. A lot of publishers and a lot of societies have preservation agreements for their online content, and a lot of authors are completely unaware of those agreements, and when they find out about it, they are rather relieved.
Good point.
Excellent. Maureen, are you sure? You had some comments you wanted to share.
I had mentioned we're closing out the panel now, but I was just thinking this morning we're talking about at least society needs and wants and desires and challenges, but don't forget STM itself as a society, and just on days like this and interactions like this have really made my professional career better. So as a society yourself, or as participating in this society yourself and a member, it's just an interesting reflection
also,
to go into lunch.
Lorraine, I want to thank you. She is now our chair of our membership committee.
Totally unrelated.
Totally unrelated.
Totally unrelated. No, but I worked with Angela Cochran and Kate Pearson on this day, putting this together, and it's just been such a delight to get to know colleagues after 15 years, kind of putting your head up and saying, okay.
Beautiful.